may have seen headlines about this woman right here. Her name is Lilly, a London-based OF creator who recently made headlines for choosing to sleep with over 100 men in one day. Now, she describes hooking up with strangers as a hobby and even encourages others to follow in her footsteps.
I saw one other girl put a post up saying she's gonna do it as well, which I don't mind being trendsetter. I hope other girls follow my path.
But behind these proclamations about how much she loves it is the reality of what this does to a person. How empowered do you think she felt afterwards? Well, you tell me.
It's not for the weak, girls, if I'm honest. It feels intense. Sorry.
Okay. Just take
yeah, 1 minute.
Lilly's story is a perfect example of what happens when our culture treats sex as meaningless, something purely physical, detached from intimacy or commitment. Initially, it might seem empowering, but the long-term consequences are inescapable. In this video, we're going to use Lilly's story to highlight the scientifically proven consequences of her decisions and the real-life consequences of treating sex as casual. If you believe what culture says about casual sex, you may believe Lilly when she says this.
I did this as a hobby before I did it for work. So I was sleeping around and doing these stuff like that before I actually did OnlyFans. I was a lot more promiscuous off camera. I do this job because I love it so much.
But there's also a reason why she said this.
Sometimes you'd disassociate and be it's not normal sex at all. In my head right now, I can think of 5, 6 guys, 10 guys that I remember. And that's it. It's just, I don't know, it's just weird, isn't it?
She describes disassociating, feeling numb or detached, and research backs up what she's feeling. Studies show that casual sex with strangers leads to poor mental health and self-esteem for both men and women. And several other studies show that casual sex often leads to increased depression, anxiety, and regret, especially for women. But we're all wired to like and enjoy sex. So at first, casual encounters might feel exciting or freeing. But over time, many people experience a sense of emptiness, loneliness, and even a loss of self-worth. And Lilly's sense of disconnection reflects what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, when our actions conflict with our deeper values, leading to emotional turmoil. So this means that when that emotional excitement wears off, a lot of people experience the emotional toll of casual sex. And it seems like this is the case even for Lilly, who had to admit that this wasn't what she expected.
It's not for the weak, girls, if I'm honest. It was hard. I don't know if I'd recommend it.
Why not?
I think if you're a different type of girl, it's very it's kind of like being a prostitute in a sense of it's just a different feeling. I don't know how to explain it.
It's not just having sex with someone.
Yeah. Just one in, one out. It feels intense.
More intense than you thought it might.
Definitely.
Sorry. Okay.
So, at least scientifically speaking, I think she said it best when she said,
it's not normal.
The reality is, when we treat sex as meaningless, we risk treating ourselves as meaningless too. The negative emotional and psychological effects of casual sex have been reported in countless studies and experienced firsthand by many. But what a lot of people don't know is what happens in the brain during sex, making this far more serious than you might initially think. Lilly herself described feeling disconnected after her 100-man stunt. And this isn't just an emotional reaction, it's actually tied to how our brains are wired. You see, this is your brain right here. And when we have sex, our brains release chemicals called oxytocin and vasopressin. These are the same chemicals responsible for the deep and powerful connection between a parent and a child, but they're also released during sex. So the more that we engage in sex with someone, the more these chemicals are released and the stronger the bond becomes. Now, this bonding process, of course, has its pros and its cons. On the positive side, it deepens intimacy between two people and can create a lifelong connection. But when the bond is broken, the pain is real. Studies show that emotional and physical pain are processed similarly in the brain, which is why a breakup after a sexual relationship can hurt so much. And I think that a lot of us can relate to this. If you didn't wait for marriage, you probably experienced how sex makes you more emotionally vulnerable in a relationship. But if that relationship ended, breaking those bonds in the brain hurt deeply, making it harder to be vulnerable again. So Lilly, of course, is going through this to a greater degree and not yet realizing the long-term consequences of her decision. Consequences, by the way, that I've experienced firsthand on a smaller, but still a very unfortunate level. This painful process of breaking the bond happened to me when I was younger, and so my solution at that time was to not be emotionally vulnerable. To protect myself, I mentally detached sex from emotional bonding, and at first, it worked. Ending relationships hurt less, and hooking up felt easier. But in hindsight, this detachment made it harder to bond deeply when I eventually found someone that I wanted to spend my life with. Ironically, that very act that's supposed to deepen intimacy and trust made it harder for me to deeply bond with my wife in the long run. So I guess my point in saying all of this is that that, I'm not sitting here as someone who's always held this view or doesn't understand the dating scene today. I know the pressures to hook up and the desire to deepen a bond with someone that you care about, but the long-term consequences of separating sex from bonding aren't worth that temporary relief. And if I'm feeling the effects of these decisions years later, I can only imagine the effects that Lilly will be feeling down the road and how it will significantly impact her potential future relationships. Years from now, she'll almost certainly find it incredibly difficult to form deep, trusting relationships because these casual encounters that she's having right now are training her brain to avoid vulnerability. So science alone provides a compelling case against having multiple sexual partners. Beyond physical risks like STIs and unplanned pregnancies, the emotional, psychological, and the relational consequences highlight how casual sex is not in your best interest. But the good news is that sex doesn't have to lead to pain and disconnection. There's a much better way to approach it, and one that's proven to maximize your sexual satisfaction. Research shows that those who enjoy sex the most are not people that have casual sex, but instead people that have sex inside of the confines that God laid out for us in the Bible. It may sound counterintuitive, but married couples report having the most fulfilling sex lives, with only those that waited for marriage having the most satisfying sex life, not those living a life like Lilly's, which she claims will bring happiness. This research helped me to understand why Christianity calls us to reserve sex for marriage. Within marriage, sex continuously strengthens the bond between two people, reinforcing their mutual commitment. It drastically reduces that cycle of bonding and breaking, leading to happier marriages and more fulfilling sex lives. So once again, science confirms what God's design has shown us all along. We're wired for monogamy and lifetime commitment, and overall, we thrive when we live that way. Lilly's choices have created a cycle of broken bonds, but God's design offers the opposite, a lifelong connection built on trust, intimacy, and mutual commitment. But I don't want you to misunderstand me here. If you've already had sex outside of marriage or even lived an extreme lifestyle like Lilly's, it's important for you to know this. Nothing that you've done is too big for Christ to forgive. While forgiveness doesn't erase all of the consequences, His grace allows us to heal and move forward with a new hope. What this means is that if you're like me, you have to be more intentional about renewing your mind, which is the key to breaking unhealthy patterns. As Paul says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, like sex outside of marriage, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Science shows that our minds develop patterns over time, making bad habits harder to break. And this is called neuroplasticity. But as we're transformed by the renewing of our minds, we create good habits that replace the old ones. And once this process starts, as the next verse says, then we will be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will. God's will for us is good, and it fulfills the deepest desires of our hearts. He designed sex to be experienced within the mutual, self-giving commitment of marriage, where it strengthens intimacy and creates the most complete and satisfying sexual experiences that we can have. So I want you to take a moment and pray for Lilly, because at just 23, she has a lot of life ahead of her, and her story isn't over. Pray that she finds healing, hope, and a true relationship with Jesus Christ, because He can redeem even the most broken parts of our lives. And as you pray for Lilly, take a moment to reflect on your own life too. Ask God for healing, renewal, and the wisdom to follow His good, pleasing, and perfect will for your life. And by the way, if you're curious about sex and bonding in the brain and how God designed us, I've linked this book down below, which is a great introductory book that helped me to understand all of these concepts a lot better. It's a great starting point if you want to explore this topic further. So check out that book if you're interested, and then check out this video that's on the screen, as YouTube's algorithm thinks that you'll like it. Let's see if they're right. See you guys next time.